sites to carry out sort of massive sort of armored offensives because of the presence of drones and the visibility that is provided.
Ukrainian forces hitting back harder against the Russian-backed troops in the south. Is this the counteroffensive that Kiev's been telling civilians that it's preparing for?
At 4:29 a.m., the sky outside Moscow lit up, but not from fireworks. It was the sudden strike of kamikaze drones, loitering munitions, and long-range rockets converging on Russia's $2.4 billion military transport hub. Within minutes, warehouses turned into fireballs and fuel depots collapsed. But here's the question. How did motorbikes and tiny robots play just as big a role as tanks and jets in ripping this fortress apart? Today, we're breaking down the operation that transformed a secure hub into a logistical nightmare in less than 90 minutes. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video. What makes a $2.4 billion transport base near Moscow worth the risk of a pre-dawn attack? The answer lies not only in its value, but in its function. This hub wasn't just a cluster of warehouses and runways. It acted as the central artery pumping fuel, vehicles, and ammunition to the Russian front. Tank columns moving toward Ukrainian cities, artillery batteries holding defensive lines, even basic supply trucks supporting reserve units all depended on the flow that passed through this one steel and concrete complex. If the artery clogged, Moscow's ability to project power forward weakened almost immediately. That reality made the base invaluable, not only in terms of money spent to build it, but in the role it played as the beating heart of Russia's military logistics. Defending that heart came at enormous cost. Ringing the perimeter were some of the most advanced surface-to-air systems Russia deploys in combat, including S-400 missile batteries with ranges capable of tracking targets hundreds of kilometers away. Hardened bunkers dug into reinforced layers of concrete shielded command posts and fuel reserves from direct hits. Fighter patrols of MiG-29s prowled the skies at intervals, designed to intercept anything nearing Moscow's protective bubble. Radar stations overlapped coverage to catch small drones and cruise missiles, while mobile electronic warfare vehicles jammed incoming communications. On paper, this web of defenses rendered the transport hub untouchable. To most planners, any strike, no matter how bold, came close to suicide. That was precisely the challenge. The area housed one of the densest air defense networks on the planet. Any conventional raid would have been shredded before reaching its target.
The occupiers have already felt very well what modern artillery is, and they will not have a safe rear anywhere on our land which they occupied.
Bombers could not cross the layered radar nets. Long-range missiles risked interception by the S-400 rings. Even stealthier drones were likely to suffer detection and countermeasures. Simply put, every approach the textbook offered left Ukrainian forces staring at walls they weren't supposed to climb. And yet, reconnaissance began quietly building opportunities. High-altitude UAVs traced flight corridors during routine weather passes. Commercial satellite imagery, fused with signals intelligence, compiled patterns of refueling, troop movements, and convoy departures. This data didn't just create maps. It formed what commanders called a digital kill map, a living schema where every truck, runway, and checkpoint flickered into place like tiles on a screen. Still, intelligence alone didn't solve the issue. Without a method to pierce the fortress walls, the operation would remain nothing more than a theory. What tilted the balance came from unexpected directions. Instead of massive bombers or large mechanized battalions, the plan introduced motorcycles, compact robots, and precision drones. While trivial compared to billion-dollar jets, each piece exploited blind spots armored grids couldn't seal. Motorbikes could snake through rural backroads unseen by radar.
Relying now on these small infantrymen, groups of infantrymen that are penetrating behind enemy lines.
Mine-laying robots, heavy enough to carry explosives but light enough to escape serious notice, were capable of crippling roads without announcing themselves with heat signatures. These tools weren't extravagant. They were accessible, low-profile, and mobile. exactly suited for slipping past rigid defenses and creating pressure from angles Moscow never anticipated.
It is one of the most daring and devastating Ukrainian attacks on Russian troops since the start of the war.
The comparison that often goes overlooked is naval. An aircraft carrier depends not only on the steel island that sails in open waters, but on its supply chain, the tankers, replenishment ships, and port hubs that keep it alive. Disrupt any part of that line, and the floating city loses momentum. Russia's transport hubs served that same purpose on land. It made artillery batteries thunder. It kept armor columns fueled. It fed the front with a rhythm assumed too stable to break. But innovation feeds on assumption. The very size and seriousness of defenses around the hub created the illusion of certainty, and Ukraine's plan turned that illusion into a weakness.
Sides to carry out sort of massive armored offensives because of the presence of drones and the visibility that is provided.
When flexible methods confront rigid barriers, even the strongest fortress can shift from untouchable to exposed. So with vulnerabilities identified and unconventional tools at the ready, the crucial question remained, how exactly did Ukraine coordinate drones, robots, motorcycles, and rockets into one overwhelming strike? At 4:29 a.m., the sky over the transport hub cracked open. The first flashes weren't missiles, but swarms of low-cost drones darting into the air defenses like gnats. They weren't built to destroy bunkers or ignite fuel tanks. Their purpose was to tug at the radar nets, to force Russian operators to lock onto shapes too small to matter.
At that time, the Ukrainians understood how they had to fight back. With the help of other countries, they began to use drones.
For minutes, the perimeter lit up with interceptors firing at shadows, missile batteries wasting million-dollar shots against plastic shells with engines barely larger than a lawnmower. It was deliberate waste, and it worked. At high altitude, a second layer of surveillance pushed the tempo forward. Reconnaissance UAVs cruised at 30,000 feet, riding steady orbits while bouncing imagery onto encrypted channels that matched with satellite relays above. Every radar sweep and every anti-air launch shifted the live map. Commanders weren't just glancing at diagrams. They were watching a board game remake itself in real time. Convoy routes highlighted. Guard towers flickered green and red as operators came online or went silent. Decoy drones were already crafting lanes of distraction, corridors where the real strike elements could thread an approach.
Ukrainian forces hitting back harder against the Russian-backed troops in the south. Is this the counteroffensive that Kiev's been telling civilians that it's preparing for?
This was the moment the fortress first showed seams. But Russia wasn't idle. Within 10 minutes, the S-400 batteries activated in full. Missile crews prepped reloads. MiG-29 fighters throttled up from regional airstrips to hunt what appeared like endless aerial intruders. Yet this cascade of defense generated its own weakness. Across the spectrum, jamming signals throttled once reliable communications. Operators stared at frozen screens and shouted through broken radios to coordinate launches. Fighters circling above lost clear updates on where to turn next. The interference didn't sever every cord, but it slowed response at the very time precision and speed mattered most. The choreography was beginning to show its design. Meanwhile, the ground war unfolded almost invisibly beneath the flashing skies. Compact robotic units crept toward supply arteries feeding the transport base. They weren't autonomous tanks, but small tracked vehicles carting mines and satchel charges. By the time Russian troops noticed their signal, several roads erupted in chain blasts, collapsing asphalt and snapping convoys in half. The explosion noise became cover for the next insertion. Out of smoke and broken ground lines poured motorcycle squads, hundreds strong, splitting into wide flanks like wings spreading behind enemy lines.
We see Russia and Ukraine constantly adapting their tactics in response to rapid technological change.
Speed was their asset. Engines ran low, headlights covered. They skimmed across back roads, weaving through woods and villages before sweeping onto the open approaches. 200 bikes split into separate prongs, disappearing and reappearing as phantom units that seemed to multiply with every gap in the smoke. They carried rifles, light mortars, and drones tethered for close support. Detection systems built for large vehicles lost track of them. Soldiers expecting tanks or armored carriers now face squads of riders slipping into their blind spots. Above them, a new phase matured. Kamikaze FPV drones plunged headlong into bunkers and watchtowers. Each had only a warhead and a camera lens, yet combined with timed mortar strikes from bike teams, they multiplied lethal effect.
Its victory in Ukraine is inevitable. This extraordinary operation shows that Ukraine is still in this fight.
I think the Ukrainians have been very, very effective at developing drone systems which are relatively cheap.
Guard towers collapsed in sequence. Concrete shutters cracked open, exposing munitions and storage shelters. The layers of defense once thought too dense were being reduced step by step by the very tools least expected. At 5:19 a.m., a laser-guided munition hit its mark with chilling accuracy. It drove into a fuel reservoir already strained by earlier blasts. The result towered above the base, a plume of fire rising 150 feet, followed by concussive waves ripping across warehouses. Secondary explosions rolled through the complex as ammunition stacks ignited one after another. In less than an hour, the fortress had turned into its own chain reaction of destruction. What unfolded wasn't random destruction, but deliberate tempo.
Different account claiming at least 7 people were killed. Ukraine is hailing it as a victory as it tries to drive back Russian forces.
Each pawn, from a plastic decoy glider to a soldier on 2 wheels, moved within a rhythm designed to overwhelm. Ukraine's multi-domain choreography couldn't rely on raw firepower, so it leaned on timing, layering, and constant shifts between domains of air, land, and electronic warfare. By synchronizing smaller pieces into singular momentum, they broke the perception of invulnerability. With the hubs split into fires and broken logistics, the central question shifted. Capturing the base wasn't the struggle anymore. The new reality forced everyone watching to ask what this loss meant for the wider battlefield stretching beyond it. A $2.4 billion military hub, once promoted as proof of Moscow's reach, now lies gutted, warehouses reduced to rubble, and storage tanks burned out.
Russian logistics hubs, Russian weapons depots to basically deprive Russia of that huge advantage it's been having. And
what was built to anchor the Russian front became in less than 2 hours a graveyard of fuel, twisted steel, and ruptured defenses. The deeper shift isn't only in the destruction, it's in the demonstration that highly networked defenses crumble when met with speed, coordination, and tools applied in rhythm.
That has now become a thing of the past, and this war is now in a very different and a very difficult sort of a terrain.
If a site considered untouchable near Moscow can be forced open, what happens when every command post, depot, or runway faces the same possibility tomorrow?